So, ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, honoured guests, thank you very much for coming along this evening to support the Institution of Structural Engineers and to listen to my presidential address. It seemed like only yesterday when in 2009, in January, I was elected the most junior, and I might also add the youngest vice president. And I was thinking, yeah, 5 years, plenty of time to think about these things. Well, how time flies, and we're here this evening. Let that be a warning to some of you other vice presidents. It goes in a flash. I'm rather humbled and honoured to be chosen as your president for 2014. And in the 5 years that I've been a vice president, I've met lots of people and I've become involved in lots of the institution's work. Indeed, I'm still employed. I hope I still will be on Monday. And I will do my best to balance the demands of my work at Thomasons with the expectations that the institution quite rightly has of its president. But it would be wrong to start this address without firstly thanking the staff of the institution. In the 27 years that I've been involved here, particularly the last 5 years for the friendship and the help that you've all shown me. And one person in particular who's been helping me for the last 27 years, Peter Jinks, who is the manager of the examination system. I think he's been absolutely fantastic and I owe him a great deal. I hope that each of you will take away something from what I have to say this evening. It will be the last time, we hope this will be the last time, that a president gives his or her address from this building. It's been our home since 1938. It's a long period of time. And I doubt that there's anyone now that can remember us being anywhere other than here. A lot has been said about our new premises in Istructe Street, but the reality is it's the leasehold building. It has 25 years to run, and in 25 years the lease will be worth absolutely nothing. I know that change brings uncertainty, but I think I am, and the board is absolutely sure that this is the right thing to do. Istructe Street, as we'll see in a moment, is a freehold premises, and in this respect, it secures our future. So here it is. This is one slide of our new international HQ. It's larger, but somewhat different from the building that we're used to at the moment. All being well, we hope to move in the last quarter of 2014. Before I go any further, there are 3 people that really should be thanked for bringing this project forward. A lot of people have been involved, but there's been a small group, Tim Eibel, who is our Senior Vice President, John Nolan, who isn't here this evening, our President from 2012 to 13, and certainly last but not least, Martin Powell, who's our Chief Executive. These 3 people, as well as me, has formed the steering group that's been responsible for overseeing the purchase of the building and developing it, as we're just starting to do, into our new international headquarters. We have now chosen a contractor and, all being well, we'll be starting work in the middle of February. As you might imagine, it's not been a straightforward thing to be doing, and after my 34 or 35 years in consulting, I finally found out what it's like to be a client. I'd like to divide my talk this evening into 3. The first part of it is a little bit about me and how I became a structural engineer. I promise to keep this mercifully short, so bear with me because what I have to say is of relevance a little bit later on. The second part is a little bit about my career, or most of my career, in a small to medium enterprise. And I hope that what I say might encourage some of you younger people to become involved in the institution, a little bit more of what it does. I can only say from my own point of view, it's been a tremendously rewarding time. And you only have to put into it what you are comfortable with. And who knows, 1 or 2 of you in the future might become a president of the Institution of Structural Engineers. Last part of my address will be a little bit about the objectives that we have for the year and how we plan to implement them. And I'm going to explain a little bit how I've been working with some of the vice presidents, putting together presidential themes that can be passed from one president to another, so that there can be some sort of continuity. And I think that this is one of the ways in which the institution will develop over the next few years. So the indications at last are that the economy is finally improving. In the UK at least, there is more good news than bad. And with this, I think the institution is in an excellent position to help its members. We are, after all, the leading body in structural engineering standards and qualifications. But in doing this, we must be outward facing. This is something that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on this evening, in fact, because it would be very easy as a membership organisation simply to talk to ourselves. We need to be outward facing and talk to others as well. Indeed, we should be proud of what we do. We should tell society what it is that structural engineers do and how we can benefit not only our members, but more importantly, society. And this is going to be the nub of my message this evening. Not only must we tell the world what it is that we want to do and what structural engineers can do, but we need to take our members along with us. We need to get to a stage where structural engineers and the institution of structural engineers is a household name in the construction industry and also a household name within the public at large. Now, worldwide membership is absolutely vital to the institution. But in doing this, we must remain relevant to the members at large. Now, there's many members that, for whatever reason, don't get involved in the day-to-day workings of the institution. But nevertheless, they value the membership and what we can do for them. So an institution for everyone is the topic that I've chosen this evening, and a theme that I'm going to return to a little bit later on. Now, I did promise you that this will be brief, and indeed it will be. But again, it has a little bit of relevance to what I'm going to say later on. My education was very much a late 1960s primary school and an early 1970s secondary school. Here I am, 8 years old. It says the beginnings of a fine structural engineer, but a structural engineer at least. Like every boy at the time, armed with a set of Meccano with which to build things, and I had a great interest in building bicycles out of spare parts. Eventually I raced my bike at the Olympic Stadium built in 1948 at Herne Hill, which sadly is in danger of closing. I also had an insatiable appetite at taking things apart, and my dad had an equal skill in putting them back together again. And that interested me because he took me along with all the remedial work that he did, and being of a mechanical nature, it really interested me. I have to say that the exercise stopped when we started looking at the family car. Now, secondary school for me was Mallory Mixed Comprehensive on the boundaries of South East London and North Kent. The emphasis there was very much on sporting achievement as opposed to academic achievement, to the extent that after 2 or 3 years I got involved in a lot of sports, and I got into the cross-country team for Southern England and London. When we got to year 4 or year 11, as many of you will be used to, we had to make a choice. We had to choose studies for our CSEs and our GCSEs. And there were 4 courses. There was science, there was the arts, there was modern languages, and there was lastly engineering. Now I say lastly engineering because rather sadly at school it was acknowledged that the people that followed the engineering course were the less academically able. And the local area had, in the late 1960s and certainly up to the end of the 1970s, there was a lot of medium and light manufacturing there. And a lot of the guys used to leave school without taking their examinations and go and follow apprenticeships. Now, I stress that there's nothing wrong with apprenticeships, and I'm very pleased that the coalition government has finally seen the value in them. But the engineering module, such as it was technical drawing, metalwork and physics. I followed this course, but I really couldn't see myself working in industry or using a lathe. Now, I wasn't really sure what to do, if I'm honest. I was very, very interested in engineering research and design. I was interested in the opportunities that these sort of tasks could bring to solve problems for people. And you'll see on the right-hand side here, I even made the papers in the early 1970s. And this was to design a floating stool, a stool for a severely arthritic lady who needed a means of raising her legs while she was sitting down. All smiles here. The stool has been inflated and Mrs. Cosgrove's legs are almost horizontal. I have to say that 30 minutes later the smiles were on nobody's face because we couldn't get the stool to collapse. This is what the academics call teething troubles, but I can assure you, wouldn't it be nice as structural engineers we had that luxury. I stayed on for the 5th form, and my examination results were not inspiring to say the very least. And by then I had taken on even more sports, volleyball and club level cycle racing. I decided to go into the 6th form. I wasn't really sure, as I say, what to do. I will remember a conversation with the careers advisor. I was explaining to him that, well, okay, the examination results were not brilliant. I was very, very interested in engineering, research and design, but I also really enjoyed my outdoor life. I enjoyed the sports, I enjoyed being outside. And I remember even to this day the careers advisor saying, well, look, Nick, why don't you follow civil engineering as a career? Civil engineering will combine your love for engineering, you like the countryside, you like sport. It seems like an excellent thing to do. I really don't know to this day whether he really knew what he was talking about, but I was very enthused. I started to look at it to see what it was that, we'll move on one, to see what it was that civil engineering could offer. It did actually mean a change in approach because I had never anticipated going to university, and indeed the school had hardly ever sent anybody there. My A-levels were uninspiring. I even managed to fill out my UCAS form with the two universities, my first and second choice, requiring exactly the same grades. The two offers that I had from engineering contractors for sponsorship disappeared, and I became a subject of the clearing system. But help was at hand. I was very lucky. I had an offer from Thames Polytechnic, which is now known as the University of Greenwich, and I'm very, very proud that two of my lecturers that taught me a lot of my structural engineering are here this evening, and thank you very much indeed. One of the things that my parents said is, well, you've done all of this sport, you really need to knuckle down and start getting to work. So no problem there, freshers week, I gave up sport and started sailing. I have to say it's the very, very best thing that I've done because I met my wife Rita there, and I wouldn't have done that had I not started. So the academics amongst you might be pleased to notice that I carried on with my research and design, and if you look at the right-hand picture there, I developed a retaining wall model. Now this is a model that was used to measure the earth pressure behind walls and looking at the various degrees of friction and how the pressure behind the wall could be affected. I designed that. I designed the pressure cells, which you can't see. I designed the strain gauge beams. And one of the things that the lecturers didn't tell me, not the two here tonight, I hasten to add, is the effect of 4.5 tons of sand on a suspended floor. I have to say that the model remained there for a further 10 years, I'm told, and it was a very worthy research project. 1979, I graduated with first-class honours in civil engineering, which was a rather better result than I achieved at school. So what is the point in my telling you all of this? Well, it is quite simple, and that is that however poor a school record might be, there is often hidden talent hidden between the boy or the girl that we need to look at and tap into, certainly in the case with me. And I think with universities, we judge our applicants for university occasionally by interview, but mainly by A-level results. And perhaps it's time to look at the alternatives. Perhaps we should look at our technician examination, our associate examination, all as a route to taking the chartered examination a little bit later on. It isn't all about A-levels and academic achievement. This is something that I'll return to a little bit later on. So in 1979, I graduated and I chose an offer from Travers Morgan, or R. Travers Morgan as they were at the time. To their eternal shame, they turned me down as a school leaver, but I got there in the end. And I'm very, very grateful that there are quite a large number of Travers Morgan people here this evening. I arrived at Longacre, where Travers Morgan used to be, waited in the reception, convinced that I was here as a civil engineer. I was going to design roads and bridges. And eventually a guy called Bill Morgan, who a lot of you will remember, came downstairs, made a point of looking around the reception. Oh, you're the only person left. Well, you'll have to come upstairs. And my career as a structural engineer had begun. I have to say that I was very, very lucky. Bill was an exceptionally good tutor, and I joined a very, very small team of engineers working in Birmingham. In fact, sometimes there were just the two of us. But actually that gave me a huge advantage because in a couple of years' time, I became very, very proficient at design, and there were things that I could do which probably takes a lot longer for graduates to achieve these days. Now, those of you that have been to previous inaugurals will note that the new president occasionally deviates, and I think that I'm also entitled to just a little bit of self-indulgence. One of the things that I was taught, mainly by Bill to start, was how to play squash. And this is my favourite photograph because this is me playing the world number 4 in 2004. And the following year he became the world number 1. Now, I might stress that I take no credit for his achievement there, but it was a very, very proud thing to do. And in case you can't work out, I'm the pink-looking one on the right-hand side with the white shirt. 1982, as a result of the very, very good tuition that I had, at the age of 24, I passed my CM examination, and the following year, in 1983, I passed my civils as well. Perhaps things went a little bit too well. I can still remember the very stark lesson that I had when I designed an overhead gantry crane. And despite being checked in-house by our engineers, despite being checked by the local authority checking engineer, when tested it deflected by far too much and it failed. Travers Morgan were very much ahead of their time and they treated the whole thing as a learning experience. It was either that or the partners didn't find out. But I was actually made to contact the client, explain what had gone wrong, who was responsible, how we were going to put it right, and yes, how we were going to pay for it as well. And I think actually if the partners hadn't found out about this, they certainly know now, because I'm very, very grateful that 2 of them are in the room this evening. Thank you guys very much for coming along. But I think that this is an excellent opportunity for us as employers and clients alike to treat things like this as a learning experience. And I found in my own career since, although the events are thankfully few and far between, it's how you deal with them. And I found that younger engineers, when we do make mistakes, respond far better to you taking them along with you and explaining what has happened, rather than get irritated and sorting them out yourself. So in 1985, 6 years at Travers Morgan, it was a big step, and I joined Thomasons, or RH Thomasons and Partners, as they were at the time. I have to say it wasn't without a certain degree of trepidation. Travers Morgan, 900 strong, a very well-known firm of engineers, internationally based. Thomasons, 2 offices, 20 people, and I was based in Cobham. I got involved in my late 20s. I got involved in a number of fairly significant projects, and I just wanted to choose one to show you the sort of things that I got up to in those days. And this is a project in Bracknell, which is just to the west of London. The project was over budget. It was a 5-storey office block made in reinforced concrete with 5 levels of underground parking. The project was over budget. There was nothing else we could do as engineers except reduce the construction time. And we were told that if we could reduce it by 20 weeks, there was still a job there. And what we did at the time, although it wouldn't be seen as innovative now, but you've got the contiguous piled retaining wall. Apologies to the non-technically minded people here, but the contiguous piled retaining wall around the outside that form the outside of the basement. You've then got these rather large columns which are supported on 2.5 metre diameter single piles, which were all good, but only concreted to the underside level of the lowest car park. The columns were then lowered into the open bores and connected to the top of the pile heads, and that enabled us then to construct the ground floor of the development. Whilst we were then constructing the superstructure up to the 5th floor, the contractor started to excavate beneath the ground floor level. And this photograph here is taken. The superstructure had almost been complete. In fact, it was at 4th floor level, and the basement had been completely excavated. I think we'll all agree that since 1992, health and safety standards have improved somewhat, and for the better as well. But there are things here that we probably would not be allowed to do in this day and age. This isn't a very good slide, but it's a project that I've just completed at the moment with the help of some of my colleagues at Thomasons. And it's a project in Gloucester. It's an 8-hectare site bounded by 2 high-speed railway lines that you can see in the photo, and a main dual carriageway which is about 6 metres higher than the site itself. The site had laid vacant for about 25 years, and it was viewed that you couldn't remediate it, it was too much money, couldn't take the materials off site, and we came up with a solution, and that was to carry out a certain amount of geotechnical testing, but also a lot of chemical testing as well. And after a while, by doing a little bit of testing and then a little bit more and telling the client what we were doing, we came to the conclusion that although the material on site, which was railway ballast, it used to be an old siding that housed the track cleaning vehicles. And then after that had finished, the site was raised by about 6 metres with railway ballast, so very contaminated. And we realised that the contamination wasn't mobile, it wasn't going to migrate off-site. So if we could cap the site, stop the contamination getting out, we could actually produce a site that was safe for the occupants to use, and this is exactly what we did. So not only did we release a site that was 25 years and it had been vacant, we found a way of keeping materials on site. Now, these sort of projects I've been very fortunate because they've given me an opportunity to learn continuously as I've been going through my career, and I think that's particularly relevant after the EGM that we had this afternoon, and how to use your work experience as CPD. Coming to the current day, these days I get involved, as I have for the last 20 years, on litigation projects and acting as expert witness and solving disputes. A couple of weeks ago I was fortunate to be in Dubai. I was part of an international arbitration. And these are things that I think, as engineers become more experienced and, yes, a little bit older, you begin to get the experience to enable you to do these sort of things. And it's something that further training is also required to be able to do as well. In the 20 years that I've been an expert, of course your duty is to the court or to the whatever other jurisdiction there is. But it still surprised me that experts, and for that matter their instructing solicitors, occasionally try to support the untenable view, when of course their duty is to the court. But again, I've been able to learn a great deal from this, not, I hasten to add, through learning through other people's mistakes, but being able to be part of the projects that were part of the dispute in the first place. I'd like, if I may, just to share a couple of these with you, and you'll see what I mean, whereby actually addressing and thinking of some fairly simple checks, some of these things just wouldn't have happened. A little while back, I was asked to advise on a dual carriageway that had collapsed. And the reason that it had collapsed was that a high-pressure gas main was being constructed beneath it. Gas main carries about gas at about 150 bar, and it's 1.5 metres in diameter. And normally it's laid in an open trench across the fields. When we get to obstructions such as rivers, or in this case the dual carriageway, the pipe is literally pushed beneath the road, a process that engineers will recognise as pipe jacking. And what happens is the pipe is pushed underneath the road. There is an auger inside the pipe which rotates and takes the spoil back along the pipe through a conveyor to be taken away. In the harder ground, the auger will extend out in front of the pipe and cut away the ground. In the softer ground, the auger will be inside the pipe, so the pipe can be pushed in. And all of this is controlled by an operator that you can see just about in the bottom, or sort of on the right-hand side, a third of the way up. And he's about 40 metres away from the work that's being carried out. Now, all of this was going very, very well, I'm told, until all of a sudden the brown clay that was coming out of the pipe turned into a black sticky mush, pieces of concrete, pieces of rubble, and an old signpost. What had happened is that in investigating it, the dual carriageway had been upgraded from a main road. The main road, a few years before that, had been upgraded from a secondary road. The secondary road had been upgraded many, many years ago from a country lane. And of course that country lane had a little footbridge, made of concrete, a signpost beside it, and this is what came out of the pipe at the end. My point is that a reasonable amount of investigation, looking at old maps, speaking to the county council, as the case was, would have saved a lot of embarrassment, and it would have saved the dual carriageway being closed for a period of 8 weeks. The one on the right-hand side is an example of a number of collapses that I've looked at in my career. This is a building, we can't really see the building itself, but we can see the consequences. But this is a building built between 100 and 200 years ago in stages, a substantial low-bearing masonry construction. The purpose of the project was to construct a basement under the whole of the building, and this was achieved by a variety of underpinning techniques. Underneath the building was an old riverbed, some of the lost rivers that we refer to in London. And the process of underpinning the building from a relatively competent material into the relatively unstable riverbed caused the unintended settlement. And over a period of a couple of days, I'm told that the internal courtyard, which is the part here that you can see that has collapsed, started to crumble. It was very fortunate that the contractor was able to get up through the various rooms in the building and evacuate it before that part of it collapsed. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but the strange part of it is that the engineer, the structural engineer who was originally engaged on the project, recommended quite a lot of exploratory work, was sacked because he was considered to be too expensive. The new team came along, and pressures of cost and therefore fees, time, and a lot of misunderstanding amongst the professional team as to who was responsible for what, and what it was that the contractor could be asked to do rather than the consultants, caused the collapse. And I think there's a little lesson there for all of us. Sometimes you have to say no. So, you might be wondering what this person standing in front of you is going to do as president in 2014, the president of the Institution of Structural Engineers. As I mentioned earlier, I've been very lucky. I've been involved with the institution since 1986. I was asked to be a marking examiner by Peter Jinks, who many of you will know, and I was told that it was for a period of 5 years and there would be a year off during that time. Somehow or another, I've managed to become part of the institution's examination system ever since. There's probably no way out. At about the same time, I received a letter from the committee of the Surrey Regional Group, which is my local branch. And the committee said that they had been quite impressed with my attendance at evening technical meetings, and would I like to be considered to join the committee. They must have been mistaken, because I'd yet to go to any technical meetings. But if the purpose of the letter was that, it certainly did the trick, and there started my involvement with the Institution of Structural Engineers. We have an enviable record of achievement. We're represented in 105 countries. We have 32 active regional groups. We have examinations which are generally recognised as being world class, and we have grades of members. We have grades of membership and members that are justifiably proud of their membership. How would the institution progress in the next few years? There are going to be many challenges. And let's just think of 3 of them. Our international outreach must continue. Our examinations must develop to reflect advances in commercial and professional practice. And of course, we must liaise with academia to make sure that we continue to train the bright young graduates that are going to be our members of tomorrow. But is this enough? Do we risk, on the one hand, being at the forefront of international engineering, but on the other, not being entirely relevant to all of our members? And as I said earlier, many of our members, for whatever reason, don't get involved with the day-to-day activities of the institution. And is there a risk that we might become detached from them? I'd like to develop this just a little bit further, if I may. For many of our members, life in larger organisations, my experience of Travers Morgan tells me this, their day-to-day life is supported by an infrastructure of support functions. So matters such as dealing with terms and conditions, employment of staff, training of staff, are all taken care of by the organisation. But we need to bear in mind that although 30 to 35% of our membership, our 27,000 membership, is based outside the UK, about 25% of our members work for companies employing 10 or less, and half of those people work for organisations employing less than 5. So my theme for 2014, and indeed beyond, is finding ways of supporting these members. And I think that this is something that is tremendously important, supporting our members that work for small organisations, not only in the UK where I predominantly work, but throughout the institution world. And perhaps I'd just like to develop this a little bit further as well. What is our outside message? Who is it that we support? What do we do? We explain very, very clearly to people how it is that they can join the institution. But how accessible are we? How accessible are we to people that do not fit the norm? What is the message that we would like to give, not only to our members, but also to the outside world? And how are we going to achieve this? Now, clearly, it's far more than one president that can achieve in 1 year. But what about if we were to collaborate with other vice presidents, and in my case, people that would tread the same path later on as I am now? A couple of years ago, I realised that tonight and 2014 was getting very close, and that after all said and done, there was probably no way out. But being president for a year is a very, very busy task, but a year is a very, very short period of time in the institution's life. Now, a lot can be achieved in a year, of course, but wouldn't it be better if the messages given by successive presidents could be linked together in some way? And by doing that, perhaps the message that we could give, not only to our members, but society at large, could be made all the more powerful. And I've had a look at this, and what has evolved is a thread of interest, or an alignment of interests, between YK, myself, and Tim Eibel, Senior Vice President. And we're trying to find a way that we can project outwardly the messages that we give. And at the moment, it's very much centred on international outreach, small businesses that I'm interested in, and education, something that Tim is very, very interested in. And as time goes by, we envisage that other vice presidents, as they indeed have already begun to do, will bring their own interests to fore, so that there can be a greater alignment of interests and a greater continuity. Please don't think for a moment that the vice presidents are going to run off and start running the institution of structural engineers, because that's far from the case. The institution has developing strategies that the presidents promote and support. My point is that presidents have their own interests as well, and it would be good if we could try and align those so that we have a more powerful message. So, as far as my own personal interests go, a number of things come to mind, things that might be taken for granted in larger practices, but are probably non-existent in smaller ones. I can remember in 1985 when I joined Thomasons, there were about 10 people there, but there was very, very little support infrastructure. We had to be very self-sufficient, and this message isn't just about providing help to our members. Our outward-facing message is that not only are we providing this support, either on our own or in conjunction with other stakeholders, but we need to collaborate with others as well. And if we don't do that as a membership organisation, it would be very easy just to talk to ourselves. So we need to be brave, we need to challenge ourselves, and we need to be outward-facing. We need to raise public awareness. Remember what I said earlier, wouldn't it be good if structural engineers and the institution of structural engineers could be a household name? And we need to promote, and I think the word is sort of raise the status of engineers in society, and I know that this is something that the president after Tim will be very, very interested in doing, so watch this space. I mentioned earlier that I've been very, very lucky to be a structural engineer, and I think we also need to be very, very accessible to all backgrounds, regardless of sex, social circumstances, or our own personal background. And even people that didn't actually perform very, very well at school, somebody like me. So in short, we need to be a diverse institution, something that others are going to be looking at later on in the year. So before I conclude, I wanted to just talk a little bit about detail. How are we going to go about supporting small organisations? Well, of course, our regional groups are going to be able to help very well here. They organise meetings, they organise examination preparation courses, they organise dinners. And all of these things are very, very important, but they are all inward-facing. And we need to take every opportunity that we can to look outwards and to explain to society what it is that we do and how we can help them. So just one or two examples. For a number of years, I served on the Professional Practice Committee. Now, this committee deals with complaints, mainly from clients about our members, but occasionally from members ourselves. And one of the things that we found was that a lot of the complaints were from homeowners, and a lot of the complaints from the homeowners were aimed at small practices. And the sort of things that we were finding, that there was misunderstanding about levels of fees, misunderstanding about the service that could be expected or given. So it must follow that there is need for guidance to engineers. how to engage with your clients, and also something that you can give to clients so they know what to expect from their structural engineer. Do we have such a document? Well, actually, yes, we do. It's quite a large document, and it's not actually that easy to find. Is it relevant to a small practitioner? We'll come to that. Is it relevant to a larger practitioner carrying out smaller work? Actually, I'm pleased to say that through the engineering side here, help is at hand, and the document is going to be published in the very, very near future. Let's look at another one I mentioned a little earlier. How do we employ staff? How do small practices employ staff? How do you deal with agreements and warranties? How do you comply with your health and safety obligations? We live in a world where there are more and more legislation to be complied with, and there are pitfalls from the unwary. The smaller organisations are going to be very, very busy doing technical work. How are they going to be able to keep up with evolving legislation? And I think that anything that the institution can do here can only be a good thing. And gradually, I'd like to see this being carried out not only in the UK, but on a global basis. I'm going to give you just 2 more examples, and then we can all join each other downstairs for a glass of wine. But what about proprietors of small organisations, people that have built up a practice and they would like to exit it, and also ensure continuity for the people that follow? Well, there must be many, many people out there that have done this before. So is there a way that we can put these people in touch with people that know what to do? Who are the specialists in the various fields of engineering? How can sole practitioners engage with them? There's many, many challenges that the smaller practices are going to face. Larger organisations will take them in their stride, and the smaller ones will probably struggle. And I can remember a couple of years ago in helping to restructure the organisation that I work with, the Thomasons, to become a company. Looking back on it, there was many aspects there of help that if we'd known the right person to contact, we might have managed to do it a little bit better. So I think there's a need for a register of people that have done it before, people that can help others. And just one more, promoting the chartered membership, the associate membership and the technician grade. And you might wonder why this is seen as helping small practices. In fact, it's really helping large practices as well. But the smaller organisations are less likely to be able to have the resource to support their younger graduates in becoming chartered engineers, technician engineers. So this is something, again, although it's going to benefit everybody, it definitely be able to support small practices as well. And this is, again, something that I'd like to see being carried out, not only in the UK, where I predominantly work, but also overseas. We are, after all, a global profession. So as you can see, there is quite a long list of ideas that I have, and I expect that many of you here this evening will have other ideas of your own. During the year, I'm hoping to visit as many regional groups as I can, and I'm very, very interested in listening to the ideas that they have. Indeed, speaking to some, I've already got some very, very interesting feedback that we will be able to use next year. Now, I will say to people, it's not just what the Institution of Structural Engineers can do for you, it's what you can do for yourself as well. We have been accused in the past of being rather London-centric, and maybe that's so. But the reality is that the institution is here to help everyone. And again, something that we can do not only on a UK basis, but on a global basis as well. I'm very, very pleased to announce that in 2014, we have made some progress, and there will be a sole traders panel that sole traders and others can work together with and try and address some of the issues here. Now, results are not going to occur overnight, I'm sure, but at least we've made a start. So in conclusion, I feel very, very fortunate that I've become a structural engineer. I might have missed the opportunity completely if my careers advisor hadn't suggested that I become a civil engineer. I'm very, very keen to support all routes of membership, and I'm particularly the small organisations. I also want to make sure that we are as accessible as we can possibly be. The last 27 years helping the institution has been very, very enjoyable, and I'm very much looking forward in some shape or form helping them in the next 27 years as well, by which time I'll be a sprightly 83-year-old. But my real message is this: We have achieved a great deal internationally. We have examinations which are generally recognised as being world-class. We are approachable. Perhaps we just need to be a little bit more outward-facing, and we need to tell the world and our clients what it is that we do. And most of all, we need to be relevant to our members and my particular interest in helping small organisations. But I didn't get here alone. Nobody gets here alone. And I've thanked the institution staff earlier for the help and friendship that they've given me. And I'd also like to thank the staff and my fellow directors at Thomasons for allowing me to be president for 2014. If there's one person that I should thank the most, it is, of course, Rita, my wife. She's supported me hugely in my career. And aside from allowing me the odd night out to play squash, the odd weekend away for sailing, few will know what that's really meant in the last few months and years when we have tried to restructure our own organisation to be what we are now. So, Rita, thank you very much. I owe you a great deal. And lastly, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Thank you.